watched my pattern haul, you've seen this pattern. It's McCalls 7993. I'm going to be doing sort of UB. I'm not going to be putting the band on it. Actually, I'm not going to make a true dress. I want to wear it more like a top, a long top. So we're going to be sewing this up today. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my pattern pieces out, and I'm going to change the sizing a little bit. I've been finding more and more with these patterns, I need a smaller size through the neck, shoulders, even the bust line, even though I'm a pretty busty, curvy girl, but I need a fuller size in the hip. So I'm going to do a little bit of pattern measurement and probably a little alteration. I'll show you any changes that I make. We'll cut it out. It's just very straightforward. It's a sleeve, a front and a back, and a neckline. I'm not doing the waist, the little band at the bottom, so not a lot to it. We'll thread up the serger and get sewing. Oh, let me show you the fabric. Almost forgot. It's this. It is a chenille. It would make a stunning blanket. You can make a great cape or coat. It would make this be so beautiful in this. I'm seriously considering ordering another color of this to make this in it, because I've been wearing this constantly. I need more than one. And I really would like to make one in a little bit lighter weight fabric, because I could see wearing this in a different season. Right now it's winter, won't be forever, and we live in Oklahoma, so even though it's winter, we've had quite a few beautiful 70-degree sunny days. So I'd like a little something a little bit lighter weight to wear for that too. So I could even see this, even though it's a chenille, it's a nice open weave. So this is my gorgeous fabric. It feels like a dream. Okay, let's get to working on the pattern and cutting out. Okay, let's talk about the pattern alterations that I did and just the pattern pieces in general. I'm doing the long sleeve one, so I'm going to just pull this up so you can sort of see. Here's our sleeve, and you can see all of these pleats at the bottom. Now, depending on the type of fabric you're doing, if you don't want to do these pleats, this could 100% be gathered. This is all going to get fitted onto the cuff. So all of this fullness has to get taken up until it fits on the cuff. Look at how wide this cuff is. If I were going to just fold this over, now this has 5/8 seam allowance, but you can see that's a plenty big cuff. So if you want that to be fitted against your wrist, you may want to size down. Now I'm cutting this out in the large, an extra large, but I know I don't want an extra large cuff. I'm actually going to cut my cuff a little bit smaller so it fits my wrist better, because I don't have an extra large wrist. So I'm going to make my cuff a little smaller, which means all of these pleats are not going to fit exactly. So if you do that kind of alteration, you're going to have to either make deeper pleats or do like I'm doing. I'm going to gather. I'm not going to put all the pleats in, and that's partly because of the fabric I chose. I think it's just going to look nicer in that soft chenille waffle gathered. So that's what I'm going to do for this. Make sure you transfer your markings for your front, your back, your shoulder, because it's going to make your life easier when you're cutting out. This is the collar, so you're going to cut one of these on the fold, and you can see that's not really that big, so doubled over, so that's 24 inches. And this again is for a knit. So I don't know if I even said that, but this is for a knit. So here's 24 inches. So if you don't have a knit, you can see that's just barely going to go over my head. Can you see that? If you were cutting this out of woven, it wouldn't work. Must be cut out of a knit. This collar won't go over your head, but do check that. Now let me show you the actual, look at the shape of this pattern. Can you see how curvy that is? It's very curvy. This actually reminds me of like what a sloper looks like from the side. It looks super curvy. And if you are a curvy girl, if you have smaller in the waist, have more of an hourglass figure, this is going to fit great. If you are busty, but not so full in the hip, this may look kind of saggy and weird in the hip line, and I would recommend slimming this down in the hip. So if you need an extra large bust, but you don't in the hip, you can actually straighten this back down. If you carry your weight in your waist, and this comes in, so this finishes, the waistline is a 43-inch waist, finished. If your waist is 45, this is going to always look snug on your tummy. It's just never going to lay pretty. You want it to skim the body, not get stuck on a body part. So if you need more, you add it. Straighten this out through here. Give yourself a little bit more in your waist so that it fits better. Now all of these measurements may work for you, but you're petite, so it's stretched out too far. The waist from the hip is just too far apart. You can easily cut on this line, shorten it up to get between your bust and your hip a little better. Now for me, all the measurements are pretty close. I'm a little concerned, even though the bust line is right, it always kind of looks bad in the shoulder and the neck, but I'm going to go ahead and cut this as an extra large, but the hip is not big enough. So here's where the pattern ended. In the back, I added about 1 1/8 and I eased that back into the waist. And in the front, I added about 7/8. So I added a little more in the back than the front because that's how I carry my weight. And I think it just works better for me for it to hang properly and to keep the side seam where it belongs. That's really the only alteration I'm making for myself. I am cutting this on the length that if I were putting a band on it, but I'm not going to put the band. So I have sort of a long top, sort of a tunic length top. And that's it. These little markings here on your pattern are where the bust line is and what the finished measurement is for those sizes. So do check these before you cut in your fabric to make sure everything's right so that you're not sad once you've cut it out and things don't quite work. I'm going to now lay out my fabric. Because I'm working with the chenille, it's directional, so I don't want to flip any pattern pieces. It may look different front to back, or my sleeve may look different than my bodice. So I'm going to be careful how I cut so that I cut as if it's directional or with nap for this because of the chenille. Same if you're working with a stretch velvet or something like that. Okay, cutting out now. Okay, I'm laying out. This is the right side, or what I'm going to be using, this inside here, for the outside of my garment. And I folded, this is 60-inch wide, so I folded wide enough to get my front and back on this side, and then I have this one layer over here, but it's plenty wide to get my sleeves out of so that I'm not wasting my fabric. I'm very much a save every bit of the fabric and use it for more things, and this would make a great scarf. This would make beautiful pillows. I can just see using this in lots of other, it could also be put into other projects, combined with other fabrics. So I'm being parsimonious as usual, even though I have plenty of fabric. I will tell you, I sewed for a lady one time. I was sewing for her, and she was a seamstress, and she was the opposite. She would buy 10 times more fabric than she needed because she did not want to measure, cut anything. She would just plunk it down wherever and cut it. It drove me crazy. It's the most wasteful way to sew. It's also the way to get most mistakes in your garment because you're not being careful with grain line or pattern matching or anything else. So be careful, pay attention, spend some time when you're laying out. It will make sewing up faster and easier. Every step that you take time with will make the sewing part smoother for you. All right. Enough of me preaching to you. I'm going to cut out and I'll see you over at the sewing machine. We're ready to sew. I'm all cut out. And the very first thing we're going to do is shoulder seams and side seams. Sometimes when you're working with knits, you don't set the sleeve in. You actually do a shoulder seam and do like a flat sleeve and then do the whole seam all together, but not in this one. If you're doing the short sleeve, you want, it has the pleats in the cap. If you're doing the long sleeve, it has the pleats at the wrist. So either way, there are pleats, but they're in different locations depending on which sleeve you're doing. And you can go ahead and fold in and baste down your pleats no matter which sleeve you're using. That can be one of the first things you do, so you sort of have your sleeve prepped for when you're ready to set it in. But we're going to go ahead and do shoulder seams and side seams. I'm serging, so I'm going to serge off a little bit on mine. I won't have the excess seam allowance. If you're at the sewing machine, you can zigzag this together on your 5/8 inch. If you have a knit like mine, most knits don't fray or come apart at all, but this type of chenille does. It lends, it leaves little, it's like velvet. It leaves lots of little fuzzy balls everywhere, so you'll want to do some sort of seam finish on it if you are doing this at the sewing machine. If you're serging, no worries, it's all done at once. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put my shoulders and my side seams together, and then I'll come back and we'll set our collar in. Like, this is, again, a pretty simple pattern other than the pleats at the cap and the sleeve, and I'm not doing the pleats. I'm just telling you now. I'm just going to do a gather there, which I will gather at the sewing machine. All right, too much talking, not enough sewing. Back in a minute. Okay, I've just serged up behind me here a top. So this is the inside, but here we are. I've got shoulder seams, I've got side seams, and now I'm ready to work on the collar. If you're working with the pattern, if you're looking at the pattern we have done, step 1 and 2, and we're ready to do view 3 or step 3. And step 3, you're going to take whichever neckline you're doing. There's 2 different ones. One's real thin and one's sort of thicker like this. That's the one I'm doing. This is the thicker one. And we're just going to sew up. I already have it folded, right sides together. So we're going to sew this seam so we have a circle, and then we'll fold it. It's very much just like we did on this one. It's going to look very similar to this too. So I'm going to go ahead and serge that really quickly, and then I'll show you how to pin it in to stitch it on. Here's my little collar. This is the inside. We're just going to flip it around. Now here's what our collar looks like. Pretty easy peasy. And I always take where the seam is, where the center, where this one seam, because we have a circle, where that seam is, I always put it the center back. If you're not comfortable putting it to the center back, put it on your shoulder seam. You don't want it to end up anywhere in the front. And I have long hair, so it covers the seam anyway, but I always prefer to put it in the back. It's the least noticeable place. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to just take our little shirt or dress, depending on how you're making it. Be very careful. These little necklines will really stretch out and knit. And what I do is I take shoulder seam to shoulder seam, like this, to find my center back and my center front. And now it's not truly quartered because the front and the back are not perfectly even in the neckline, but I'm going to put a few pins in it to mark it, and then that's how I'm going to use to pin in this collar. I'm also doing the same thing with it. I'm folding it in half. This seam in the back is the center back, so this will be my center front, and I can start matching up and pinning in. It'll go in very easily. There's not a lot of stretch to this. It fits pretty well perfectly neck line to neck hole. So I'm going to start pinning it in. I'll do top down so you can see what it looks like. Here's my center back. Here's my center front. I put pins in them. I'm doing the same. This is folded in half, so this is right sides out now. And this seam is my center back seam. So I'm going to go ahead and just line the seam up with my center back pin, making sure that I have all 3 layers edges together. I'm going to just repin that. Pull this forward and be real careful. You don't want to stretch this at all. And the fabric I've chosen, I think, could easily become stretched out. It's also very pilly. I don't know if you can see all the little soft lint it's leaving everywhere. All right, so there's my center front. I'm going to line that up with my center front pin. So now we have this partially pinned in. So can you see how that is? So now here's my front and my back. And I'm just going to kind of even this out over to the shoulder. It's not quite on the shoulder, but it's close. Put a few more pins in. Again, I'm keeping all of my layers lined up, and then I'm just going to run it through the serger. So put a few more pins in, and my neckline is ready to sew up. If you choose to do the band at the bottom, you will have no hemming in this. Everything gets self-enclosed and finished off, and it's super easy. Because I'm choosing to do the band or not do the band, I will have a hem to do. Make sure you turn your seam allowance. This is my shoulder seam. Push it towards the center back. You want your seams to flow to the back. So there's half my collar pinned in. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And again, it fits almost perfectly. Like, there's not a lot of fitting to do. You don't have to. Some necklines are much smaller and you have stretching and measuring, but this one, not much. I'm going to go serge this, and I'll be back to work on sleeves. All right, so we have done our shoulder seams, we've done our side seams, we just finished our neckline, and I will show you. This is the inside. I know, as usual, I'm working with fabrics that I love and will wear, and that means that they're probably dark or crazily patterned and may not show up in the screen, but there they are. This is our seam. It's actually quite beautiful. It's very similar to what I'm wearing as far as the neck goes. Like it a lot. So now we're going to work on our sleeve. And there's 2 things with the sleeve. If you're doing a short sleeve, we're going to go ahead and fold in our pleats. If you're doing the long sleeve, these are your pleats, and it shows direction, so you're going to actually fold the direction it tells you, and then you can baste across it. You can sew from here to here and have like sewn in pleats so that they never move or change, or you can do like I'm going to do, and from here to here where the pleats start, you're going to run 2 basting stitches and you're going to gather all that up. So I will have gathers on this part of the sleeve, but under here I will not. That's just how I'm choosing to do it. Also, we need to go ahead and sew our sleeve together, and the cuff. And the cuff, so this is my right side, and the cuff is going to get sewn together like this. So you can see, let me move this one out of the way. You And you see the angle there? So we're just gonna sew this angle for both cuffs. Make sure you have right sides together, and then they're gonna fold back just like the collar did that we did just a minute ago. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew my cuffs. I'm going to run my basting lines on here because I want gathers, not pleats. If you're working with a super soft or one that's super stiff, like if you have a fabric that you're going to have a little bit of a difficult time working with, you can also run an ease stitch it goes from circle to circle in the cap, and that's what the basting lines that you can pull up to make the cap line fit. This has no gathers in it, so that's strictly just to help it fit in. Because this is a nice, soft, loosely woven, it fits right in just like the collar did, so I'm not even going to worry about my ease stitching, but you may need it. So if you're going to do ease stitching on each individual sleeve, from circle around to circle, you'll do a basting stitch, no back stitching, and that will help you have little gather lines if you need to ease any fullness in the cap of your sleeve. All right, so we have either put in our pleats, or if you're like me, you've put in your gathers. And then I went ahead and marked the center of my sleeve. That's for later when I'm ready to start putting everything together. And I basted in a lighter color just to make it a little easier for you guys to see. So here's my sleeve. Once you get that done, you can go ahead and put this right sides together and sew up that underarm seam, which is what I have done here. So this one has its underarm seam sewn up, and I've got my cuffs made and flipped around to the right side, and I put pins in it to hold everything together. And here's my seam edge, and I've pulled it in half. Here's the other side, so I've kind of halved my cuff. And I'm gonna take that cuff and I'm setting it inside the sleeve. So here's the underarm with the seam lined up. Here's the opposite edge, or the center front of the sleeve, the center of my sleeve, and the center of my cuff lined up. And now you can see this is the fullness that I have that I'm going to use my basting stitches to pull out, get nice and even. Always pull, if you're working with basting stitches, if I can get them to separate, you want to always pull the same side. So if you're pulling on the wrong side, only pull the wrong side threads, never pull the right side threads. Because what'll end up happening is you tighten your threads instead of having a nice little channel to pull on. So you can see I can start pulling this up and gathering it, and that is what I'm going to have to stitch down. So I'm going to do that all the way around on both sides. So we're going to just pull those in, get some nice gathers, and then pin all that down across here and stitch it in. Once both sleeves are done, we're ready to just set the sleeves into, we'll set the sleeves into the body. After that, I'm hemming. You may be doing the band at the bottom. The band at the bottom is like doing the band at the top. It's pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna get my sleeves ready to set in. I'll show you when I'm ready to pin them in. We have sleeves. I'm just going to show you how it looks with the gathers, and I really like it. This fabric is so soft, it stretches so easily. I've been really having to be careful not to pull or stretch, but I do love how the sleeve looks. And I think I'm gonna try this again in a little firmer fabric because I think I could get a really interesting looking blouse on this sleeve. We're gonna set it in now though. So let's go to our bodice, and we're gonna take our sleeve. Make sure you match the correct sleeve to the correct bodice, and they're right sides together. So I'm just going to slide this in the hole and match up our little holes here. Here's our side seam and the underarm of the sleeve. We're going to line those up and put a pin in it. Remember to push all of your seams to the center back. I'm looking to see where this is my center back. Now I did go ahead and serge my hem because it was just pilling and I didn't want to lose any more, so it's serged. Marked my shoulder up here, so I'm going to line up shoulder to shoulder. It's just going to fit everything in. Now there's no ease in the underarm of your arm side down at the bottom. That should fit together perfectly. All of the ease should be up in the cap, and this is still going to fit in pretty easily because it's knit and it's soft. It won't take a lot of work to get everything to fit together. After this, I'm just going to put in a hem. I could do, on my serger, I could do the blind hem if I want to, but I think I'm just going to do a fast little hem at the sewing machine. I could even, because you can't see it, I could totally just leave it like that. You can't even tell. It's serged, but because of the type of fabric, it just disappears. So we'll see. I might try it on without doing any hem. Sometimes I don't like the way the hem looks. It just makes it a little bulkier than I want. All right, so now that's it for the sleeve. We're just gonna keep pinning this in. You can see how it's just going in super easily. And I'm just gonna serge it. So I'm gonna do that for both sleeves. And then I think I'm gonna try it on without a hem and see if I like it. Back in a flash. Here's the finished top. Now I made the top, I didn't make the little dress. This could be a little mini dress and I could definitely see wearing this with leggings. Love the fabric. If you want the fabric, it'll be down in the description where you can order it. It came from Etsy. And it's also the same place I got the green that I was wearing a minute ago. So both of those came from the same place. Fits great. I'm really happy with the alterations that I made. It's plenty roomy in the hip. I don't have to worry about it being snug anywhere. You can see how it fits on me. The sleeve is very pretty. Now I did take in the cuff, and can you see how big the cuff still is? You could, and I kind of wish I would have, put an elastic on the inside, not to make it real gathered, but just that will help hold it a little firmer. I kind of wish I'd done that. I've often do that in waistbands and in cuffs. I didn't this time, and I sort of wish I would. This is such a soft fabric, but it pulls up fine. Look at how full that sleeve is. Put my arm out. I like the gathers on it. I'm really pleased. Very fast and easy. I made this in a couple of hours, and that's including filming, which takes longer. Another simple, cute pattern. I really like this one. I kind of want to make it again. I like the band, and I might make it a little shorter and put it on the band and have another one. We'll see. I like to buy patterns that I know I'll make again and again and again. And the second time I make it always goes faster. So let me just back up so you can see the neckline. All right. Go try it out. See you next week for another fun video.